Full story. Think you're tough? Prove it. The Mafia boss mocked the waitress until she took him down. There is a small restaurant on the edge of Naples, the kind of place where the tables are covered with paper instead of cloth, where the bread comes before you even ask, and where the owner's mother still makes the tomato sauce every morning. It is not a fancy place. It does not need to be. It has been feeding the same neighborhood for 30 years, and the people who eat there are mostly ordinary. Workers, families, old men who come alone and sit for 2 hours over a single coffee. Maria was 43 when this story begins. She had been working at that restaurant for 11 years. She knew every table, every regular, every creak in the wooden floor near the kitchen door. She was not the owner. She was not the manager. She was a waitress, and a good one. The kind who remembers that the man at table 4 takes his espresso without sugar, that the woman near the window always orders the fish on Fridays, and that children need their food before they get loud. She was the kind of person who made a place feel like home, without anyone really noticing she was the one doing it. She was also a single mother, 2 kids, a flat 20 minutes away by bus. She took double shifts when she could, and saved where she could, and never complained about it in a way that asked for pity. She was just getting on with it, the way millions of women do every single day without anyone calling them brave. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, a group of men came in and took the large corner table near the back. They always came at the same time. They always ordered the same things. And they always stayed for 2 to 3 hours, talking quietly, sometimes laughing, sometimes going very still and serious, in a way that made the air in that corner feel different from the rest of the room. The man who sat at the head of that table was known in the neighborhood simply as the Don. His full name was not something people said out loud. He was heavy-set, always dressed well, with thick gold rings on his fingers, and a way of looking at people that made them feel they owed him something. He did not need to raise his voice to get what he wanted. He never had to. Everyone around him already knew their place. The staff at the restaurant knew who he was. They were not stupid. They had lived in that neighborhood their whole lives. But nobody talked about it. Nobody asked questions. When his table needed something, you brought it quickly, and you did not linger. You kept your eyes down, you smiled politely, and you moved on. That was the unspoken rule. She was the kind of person who made a place feel like home, without anyone noticing she was the one doing it. Maria had been serving that corner table for nearly 2 years. In that time, she had heard things. Not because she was trying to listen, but because she was always there, always moving quietly through the room, and because men like that often forget that the woman refilling the water glass is still a person with ears and a memory. She had heard names. She had heard numbers. She had heard short, careful sentences that meant something specific to the people saying them, even if they sounded harmless on the surface. She had stored all of it somewhere in the back of her mind, the way you store something you are not sure what to do with yet. For 2 years she had done nothing with it, not because she did not care, but because she was afraid, and because she was practical. She had 2 children at home. She had a job she needed. She had no protection, and no guarantee that anyone would believe a waitress over a man like that. So she kept her head down and carried the plates and refilled the glasses and said nothing. Then came a Tuesday in November. It started like any other evening. The Don arrived with 6 men, maybe a little later than usual. He was in a bad mood. You could tell from the way he sat down, the way he pushed the menu aside without looking at it, the way his eyes moved around the room like he was looking for something to be wrong with. Maria brought the bread. He said nothing. She brought the soup, the same soup he ordered every week. He looked at it, pushed it aside, and told her it was cold. She apologized, took it back, brought a fresh bowl. He tasted it, put the spoon down, and said it still was not right. The men at the table were watching. Some of them had the look of people who had seen this before and knew better than to say anything. Maria brought a 3rd bowl. She set it down carefully, and that was when he did it. He reached out and grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to hurt, but firmly, deliberately, in a way that was meant to make a point. He held it for a moment, while the whole corner of the restaurant went quiet. Then he looked at her, and then he looked at his men, and he said, loudly, clearly, so that everyone nearby could hear, that a woman her age, in a uniform like that, carrying plates for a living, should be thankful she had a job at all. He said it slowly. He smiled while he said it. He made sure it landed. His men laughed. He let go of her wrist, leaned back in his chair, and said, "Think you're tough? Prove it." The table laughed again. Someone made a comment. Someone else said something under their breath. And Maria stood there for 1, 2, 3 seconds, not crying, not shaking, not saying a word. She picked up the empty bowl. She turned around. She walked back to the kitchen. The cook saw her face when she came through the kitchen door. He asked if she was okay. She said yes. She set the bowl in the sink. She stood at the counter for a moment, looking at nothing in particular. And then she made a decision, quietly, without drama, the way she made most of her decisions. She had a phone number. A priest in her neighborhood had given it to her a couple of years earlier. A contact at the anti-mafia prosecutor's office. He had given it to her, without saying exactly why. The way you give someone an umbrella before it rains. She had put it in her phone and never called it. That night, after her shift ended, and she had taken the bus home and put her children to bed, she sat at the kitchen table and looked at that number for a long time. Then she called it. He said she should be thankful she had a job carrying plates. She agreed with him, quietly, and then she got to work. What followed was not a movie. There was no dramatic moment in a police station with lights and cameras. It was slow, quiet, and careful. A prosecutor's assistant called her back. They met in an ordinary place, a coffee bar 2 towns over. She told them what she had heard over 2 years of Tuesday and Thursday evenings. She was not nervous in the way people expect. She was methodical. She had a good memory, and she used it. Names, phrases, dates. The way certain words were used as codes for other things. The investigators were careful with her. They explained the process. They explained the risks. They asked if she had somewhere safe she could go if things became difficult. She said she had a sister in the north. They told her to think about it and that there was no pressure. She told them she had already thought about it. She had been thinking about it for 2 years. She was ready. Over the next 3 months, Maria met with the prosecutor's team several times. Each time, she gave more detail. Each session went into the official record. She was not the only witness. Her information helped the investigators identify 2 others who had also seen things but had never spoken. Together, their testimonies built a picture, a detailed one, the kind that takes a long time to build but, once it is built, is very difficult to argue against. During all of this, all 3 months of it, Maria went to work. Every Tuesday, every Thursday. She brought the bread. She brought the soup. She refilled the wine. She smiled when it was appropriate and said nothing when it was not. The Don sat at his corner table and held his meetings and laughed with his men and did not once look at her as though she was anything other than the woman who carried the plates. He had already forgotten what he said to her that Tuesday in November. She had not. The morning the arrests happened, Maria was not there. She had already moved, quietly, without telling most people, the way the investigators had advised. Her children were already at her sister's place in the north. She had packed 2 bags, left a note for the restaurant owner that said she needed to leave for family reasons, and gone. At just before 6 in the morning, law enforcement moved on 11 different addresses at the same time. The Don was arrested at his home. He was still in his robe. There was a coffee cup in his hand. By the time the morning news started, his face was on television across the region. By afternoon, his name was in every newspaper. 7 people were arrested that day as part of the same operation. Charges related to organized criminal activity, extortion, and several other serious matters were laid out in a document that ran to dozens of pages. Pages that included, at their foundation, the testimony of a 43-year-old waitress who had spent 2 years listening and remembering, and 3 months writing it all down. Her name appeared nowhere in the initial coverage. She was not mentioned once. 6 months later, when the trial began and a journalist asked the lead investigator in a press conference how the case had first been opened, the investigator paused. He seemed to be choosing his words. Then he said, "A woman who served him dinner." That was all he said. He moved on to the next question. But that sentence traveled. It spread through Naples the way certain stories do, not through newspapers, but through conversations. In kitchens, in markets, between neighbors on the street. Nobody knew her name, but people knew the shape of the story. A waitress, the corner table, 2 years of listening, 1 phone call. Some months after the trial began, Maria gave a single interview to a small regional newspaper. She agreed to it only on the condition that her face would not be shown, and her location would not be mentioned. The journalist asked her many questions. Most of her answers were short. Near the end of the interview, the journalist asked her if she had been afraid. She said, "Every single day. But he asked me to prove I was tough. So I did." The Don received a 19-year sentence when the verdict came down. The restaurant where Maria had worked for 11 years closed a few months after the arrests. The owners, it came out, had been paying protection money for years and could not continue once that arrangement collapsed. Maria found a new job up north, near her sister, something quieter. She was still working with her hands, still showing up every day, still the kind of person who makes a place run without getting any credit for it. She did not think of herself as a hero. She had said as much in the interview. She said she was just a woman who had heard too much and stayed silent too long. And one evening, a man with gold rings on his fingers grabbed her wrist and told her she should be grateful. And something in her just decided, very calmly, that enough was enough. That is the whole story, really. A man who had spent his entire life making people feel small looked at a tired waitress and thought she was no one. He made a joke of her in front of his friends and laughed and forgot about it before she had even reached the kitchen door. She never forgot. And neither, in the end, did the court.